again. I'm going to continue with my discussion about the visitor's visa. Good to see you again, and thanks for tuning in. So I'm going to talk about the form DS-160, and that's the application that you'll use online for applying for a visitor's visa. So this form is divided into 8 major sections. Section 1, you'll have to talk about or answer questions about your personal information, your address, your phone number, and your passport information. The second section is the travel information. And here you're going to state the purpose of your trip. And if you have travel plans, you have to state that here, and also who is paying for that trip. The third section is the contact information of the person in the United States. So if you're going to visit with someone, then yes, you need to mention that person's name and have that person's information. But sometimes you really do not need to know somebody or be visiting someone. Sometimes maybe you're coming in for a conference or an exhibition or anything like that. You really can put in the hotel information. They need to know where you're going. That's very important. The fourth section is the family information. So they want to know if you have anyone in the United States. You need to mention that information, have their address and information ready. The fifth section is the work, education, and training information. So there you put in any information about your work, and this will help them. It will also influence the decision they have to make on whether you have substantial ties in your home country. The sixth section is the security and background information. The seventh section is your current location. And the eighth section is the preparer of the application. So this is, yes, it may look very easy to complete, but please be very careful when you're completing this and make sure that you're consistent across the board. So one other point I want to mention about the visitor's visa is, for whatever purpose you're coming in, you are not allowed to work with a visitor's visa. So you should note that. Even if you are coming in for a conference and you're not supposed to receive any remuneration, but then if you're receiving any payment and it's towards maybe your hotel or accommodation, or it's incident to your stay, that's fine, you can receive that. But when it pertains to you receiving income, actual income, no, you cannot work. The visitor's visa does not allow you to work. So I have some questions. I received some questions that I would like to discuss with you, and I'll go through those questions. The first question is, can I reapply for a tourist visa after being denied? And the answer is yes, absolutely, you can reapply. But the question following that is, as to when are you supposed to reapply? And this will depend on how your interview went. You need to listen up to know the reason for the denial in the first place, and you will be able to ascertain whether you have overcome the reasons for that denial before you schedule your next interview. The next question is, can I appeal a denial of a tourist visa or a visitor's visa? No, you cannot appeal. However, you can reapply. The third question is, what is a denial under INA 214B? So INA means Immigration Nationalization Act. And this is specifically mentioned because that is what, when you are denied a visa, you're going to be given a slip. Sometimes it's a colored slip, depending on your embassy. And it's going to say you're denied based on INA 214B. So let's see what INA 214B says. It states that every alien shall be presumed to be an immigrant until he establishes to the satisfaction of the consular officer at the time of application for admission that he is entitled to a non-immigrant visa. Yes, this is legalistic. What does this mean? Well, it means that before you attend the interview, if you're going to the interview before the consular officer, you're already presumed to be an intending immigrant. That is, the officer has already presumed that you are not going to come back. So it is your burden, the burden is on you to establish or persuade the interviewing officer or the consular officer that you actually intend to come back. And it's not just going to the officer to say, oh, officer, I plan to come back. No, you really have to prove that. And proving that means you're showing that you're not going to abandon your home country or whichever country you're applying from. You're planning to return to your country after that short visit to the United States. And things like the documentary evidence as well as the questions you answer. But at the end of the day, the consular officer will make that determination based on how you answered your questions or the documents you have provided. So that is always the presumption, but you have to satisfy the officer that know that you will actually be coming back. And if you have been traveling and going and coming back and complying with the visa terms, then there's more likelihood that you may not be denied a visa. But again, because it's discretionary, it all depends. The next question is, will I have to pay another filing fee if reapplying after a denial? Yeah, the answer is it depends. And this really depends on the reason for your denial. If you're being denied based on INA 214B, most likely, yes, you would have to pay another filing fee. But if you are being denied based on INA 221G, 221G means that either your application was lacking essential information and maybe you are given time to bring that information, or your application was being held for further processing or administrative processing. So in those kind of scenarios, as long as you reapply within 1 year, you may not need to pay the filing fees. But again, it all depends on the embassy, and each embassy is different. So the next question is, which supporting documents should I take to the interview? And this really will depend on the purpose of your visit. You have to make that determination. If you're coming in as a visitor, just on vacation and all that, you really have to tell them how long you plan to stay, what your ties are to your country, where you work, and what will bring you back to your country. If you're coming in for medical reasons, you should be able to furnish information that, and first of all, satisfy why you're not able to get this medical treatment in your country. And then, are you able to afford it? You have to show proof that you're able to afford it, okay? And if you're coming for a conference, you show proof of the conference and how long it's going to be and what your plans are, you know. So it all depends on what you're coming in for. So the next question is, can I come to the United States to give birth? Wow, that's a very good question. And the answer is no. And I guess it will depend on what you mean by coming to the United States to give birth. It's actually called birth tourism. So if the purpose of your visit under B2 is that you're coming in based on medical reasons, and you're coming in just to give birth to your child so that that child can attain the US citizenship status, then no, it is not permitted. And actually, last year, January of 2020, there was a policy that came into effect saying that no, you can't come into the United States solely to give birth so that your child can attain that citizenship status. It is not allowed. However, if you're coming into the country based on medical reasons and maybe that your child has some complications which cannot be treated in your home country, yes, sometimes those may be granted. You can still come into the country and to give birth to your child here. The next question is, what if my current passport expires and it does not contain my visa? So like I said earlier, in order for you to enter the country, you should have a valid passport. For you to apply for a visa, you should have a valid passport. But if you had applied for a passport, because sometimes you apply for a visa and then your visa is stamped, but you don't travel immediately. And maybe when you're ready to travel, your passport would have almost expired. So it's always good for you to get a new passport, but in this scenario, the new passport will not have the visa. So you can either go back to the embassy and have them cancel the visa in your old passport and transfer the visa to the new passport. Or if you have to travel, you travel with both passports so that whoever is looking at it, especially the customs and border patrol officers at the port of entry at the airport, they would see, oh, you have your visa in this passport and you don't have a visa in the other passport, but the passports are linked, they are related. And this is most importantly, I'll have to draw your attention to make sure that your names has to be consistent in both passports. If they're not consistent, then it means that the passports are different and you cannot link both passports. The next question is, what if my marital status changes? How do I update that? So if you were married when you applied for your visa and it was stamped and then afterwards you got married, yes, you can go back to the embassy. And again, it depends on the embassy to update that status. And if they update the status, they can either transfer the visa to your new passport with your new marital name. So it's always good to contact the embassy. The next question is, how do I avoid being rejected on grounds of the 214B? So in doing that, for you to avoid that, that's a good question, but this will actually depend on you. All you have to know is that you have to answer truthfully all your questions, beginning from the application to the interview to when you come into the country. You have to always be consistent with your answers. You have to establish strong ties to your country, to your job, to your family, and anything that you know that will satisfy the consular officer that you have these ties and there's no way that you're going to abandon any of these ties to live in America. So the onus is on you, the burden is on you to communicate this information to the consular officer. And if the consular officer is satisfied, he or she will then issue you a visa and you'll avoid a 214B denial. The next question is, if I'm planning to travel with my children, would they need separate visa? Yes, your children will need a separate visa. So if they have their passport, their visas will also be stamped in their own passport. Now, about attending the interview, if they're minors, you all may be able to attend the interview together. So again, it all depends on the embassy. And this is another good question. What are the common reasons for tourists or visitors visa denials? So this is very broad. The visas, the denials and their reasons could be anything ranging from if you've had past criminal convictions, you have violated your visa status, maybe sometime you came, one of your entries you came in, you overstayed, and things like that, or you committed fraud, or you misrepresented information on your visa application. The reasons are, there are various reasons, so it really all depends. Another reason could be a public safety reason, especially when it comes to public health. If you have a contagious disease like tuberculosis, that could also pose as a reason for denying your visa. So the next question is, can I change my status from a B1, B2 to another visa classification? That's a good question. So yes, let's say this will now depend on what was stamped in your passport when you entered the country. So sometimes when you enter the country, you may have a stamp that will say B1 or B2, and then now it gives you the dates on when you entered and when you're expected to leave. And this you'll find on your I-94. However, if your passport, in your passport, instead of just stamping when you're supposed to and when you entered and when you're supposed to leave, there is another endorsement which you have no COS. That means no change of status. It means you cannot change your status for that visit. You can also have no EOS. This also means no extension of status. So for that visit, you cannot change your status and you cannot extend your status. So if your date is 3 months, if you're given 3 months, you just stay the 3 months. Don't extend that, don't stay beyond the 3 months, and don't bother applying for a change of status or an extension of status because that won't be granted. And then you leave so that you are in the good books of the immigration officers. However, if you don't have that endorsement, you're able to change your status and you're able to adjust your status in the United States. So the last question is, can I visit the United States on a tourist visa or apply to renew my visa, my tourist visa, if I have a pending immigrant petition? I'll read that question again. So can I visit the United States on a tourist visa or apply to renew my tourist visa if I have a pending immigrant petition? So I'm going to break these answers in two. So what this essentially means is, and this is a very good question too, is can I visit the United States? So let's say you have a pending immigrant petition, maybe your child petitioned for you and you have an approved I-130. And then now you have need to travel to the United States, maybe to attend another child's graduation. So I guess the question is, can you visit? And the question is, the answer is, as long as you have a valid visa, a valid B1, B2 visa, yes, you can visit, even while you have a pending immigrant petition. So, same thing happens. The second arm of the question is, can you apply to renew your tourist visa, even if you have a pending immigrant petition? Yes, that means if you have an approved I-130, but yet you have not been invited for an interview or you haven't gotten your green card, can you visit the country in the meantime, or can you apply for a visitor's visa? Yes, you can apply. And in your visitor's visa, you just have to state that you have a pending immigrant application if that question is asked. So at all times, you want to be truthful. So if you disclose that, and if the consular officer knows that you have a pending application but still grants you a visa, yes, you can still come in. So I guess that's the answer to that question. So that brings me to the end of this segment. But I have a news update I would like to share with you. On the 31st of December of 2020, the President Donald Trump, extended the executive orders on certain non-immigrant and immigrant visas. So he extended that ban, saying that because the executive orders were actually in effect in April and June of 2020. So they were supposed to expire on December 31st of 2020. But instead of allowing it to expire, he extended it till March 31st of 2021. So what does this mean? It means that, and first off, it applies to only people who are outside the United States. And it applies to some visa classifications, not all visa classifications. And in this sense, it really does not apply to the tourist visa, except those restrictions, the CDC restrictions I read previously. That's for those affected by coronavirus. So this really should not impact the tourist visa, but it impacts non-immigrant visas and things like the H-1B, the L-1 visas. These are employment-based visas. It affects them. And it affects certain immigrant visas as well. So this is still unfolding, and we'll still see if this will actually be implemented. Maybe it may or may not, but we'll see what happens. So that's the update I need to share with you. And at this time, it brings me to the end of this presentation. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you'll be able to share your comments and be able to share with others who will be interested in this information. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye.
My whole life, my father told me stories about moving to the United States. He would tell me that his brother, my Uncle George, was already living here and let my father stay with him for a while. Through my Uncle George, my father was introduced to our cultural organization here in America, who helped him make connections, apply for college, find his first job, and adjust to life in a completely different culture than he was used to. The Cultural Association helped him get started on his new life. My Uncle George would bring my father with him to the annual Summer Cultural Groups Festival, and later, he would bring me. It was incredible to see so many people of all ages laughing and celebrating with food and song and dance. It brought back the best feelings of home and gave my father the opportunity to pass his culture, language, and values on to me. My father and Uncle George were very close, so when George died last year, my father wanted to honor his wishes to be buried with a traditional ceremony back at his birthplace. My father told me that because Uncle George had cultural group life insurance, he was able to afford to bring George home and have the traditional burial George wanted. Though my father had been able to honor my Uncle George's wishes, it got me thinking about my own family. One day, I'd have to make the same arrangements for my own parents, and my wife's parents as well. Of course, we would want to bring them home and honor their wishes, but it would be a financial hardship for our family. There were a lot of things to think about, even though I really didn't want to think about them at all. When my father told me about cultural group life insurance, he told me it's intended to help families when they need it the most. It's not tied to an employer, so no matter where my career takes me, I'll always have coverage. The more people who participate and the younger they are, the more it helps keep the insurance premiums down for the entire association. Because my parents have cultural group term life insurance, there will be money available to help me provide the kind of service I want to give my parents. And by joining, I can put my mind at ease and continue to celebrate our traditions into the future. With cultural group life insurance, I can worry less and spend more of my time celebrating with the people who matter most to me.